Ladies, gentlemen, Yu-Gi-Oh players, hello. My name is EJ, and I hate every single one of you. I am sick to death of the constant combos and 35-minute turns that you people have decided is a game. And so I have dedicated my career in Yu-Gi-Oh! To finding the most efficient ways of punishing a lot of you for your hubris. Today's deck, and the deck I feel will take plenty of time to get right, comes from the early days of the game. Days that weren't necessarily better, but days that held a certain amount of charm. Before Teledad. Our deck for today is Relinquished, and I hope that by understanding what makes this tick, you'll understand exactly what you're in for if you ever play me at your locals. Fucking stop it, Travis! Obviously, the first part of any Relinquish deck is the title card. Relinquish, run at 3. Makes sense. Relinquish is, to say the least, an underutilized card in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's not hard to see why. It is fairly limited. It was even limited back during Magic Ruler. It is a card that has very little protection from anything other than a straight battle. But oftentimes, a straight battle is what he's best at. Especially with the extra help that Legendary Duelist Ancient Millennium offered for him. Cards like Millennium Eyes Illusionist. Now, Millennium Eyes Illusionist is the hand trap that time forgot. A very useful 2-star monster, level 2, that can be discarded at quick effect speed to immediately let you target any effect monster that your opponent controls and equip it to any Relinquished or Eyes Restrict fusion monster whose effect it qualifies for, as if it was being equipped with that monster's effect. So I could, if I was forced to go first, play Relinquished, leave it, have Millennium Eyes Illusionist in my hand, and the moment that they play their card to get ready to do something or swing at Relinquished, I activate Millennium Eyes Illusionist, pitching it to the grave, and immediately equip that monster. Unfortunately, Millennium Eyes Illusionist does not work for normal monsters, but there are about as many of those played in Yu-Gi-Oh! As none at all. So I'm not super worried about that showing up. Next, a even more obscure card for the deck is Illusionist Faceless Magician, or as I like to call it, Extra Lives. You see, when any Relinquished or Eyes Restrict monster dies, any of those 3 is destroyed by effect or by battle, I can immediately summon Illusionist Faceless Magician from either the hand or the graveyard. And if Illusionist Faceless Magician should die or really leave the field for any reason to go to the graveyard, I immediately get to resummon Relinquished or that Eyes Restrict monster from my graveyard.
So why not run 3 of this?
It is a level 5 in a deck where you are very rarely tribute summoning. Now, what is sometimes useful is the oft-forgotten second effect of Millennium Eyes Illusionist, which is a non-negotiable effect. As soon as a Relinquish or Eyes Restrict monster hits the board, for any reason, if it's here, Millennium Eyes Illusionist returns to your hand from grave. It's not negotiable. It literally says right on there, you cannot, this is not optional. So you had better do it. So you have this amazing outlet as ritual fodder for Relinquished. If you use Polymerization or any fusion card that's not Relinquished fusion to make Millennium Eyes Restrict, you get it back immediately. It keeps coming back, and it makes a fairly stable little engine. And these are some of my favorite cards in the entire game. And hopefully I've been able to illustrate why. And then we move into the nasty stuff. And if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! At any point in the past 3.5 years, nothing says nasty like kaiju. I run 6 to occasionally up to 7 kaiju, or as low as 5 in the deck. And it's not hard to see why. You've filled your board. You have your best cards on field. You are begging me to break it. And I drop Gamma Shell on you. And then now that you have lost some way to get at me, special summon Relinquished.
Kaiju
and then I eat your Gamma Shell after playing another Kaiju. And I swing at you for somewhere in the ballpark of 5,400.
Yeah, I got a question. What else does Relinquished eat besides monsters?
The better question, Franklin, is what are you going to eat if you don't shut the fuck up and let me continue? And the answer is my foot with your ass.
I thought that both of the answers to both those questions was a dick.
No, Travis, that's what you mean.
Hey, man.
Try to add a little bit of culture to this fucking wasteland of a channel. And this is how they respond. Anyway, continuing on the kaiju train, we have Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode, everybody's favorite anti-board flood card. This does not have the same end goal as with Relinquish eating it, so to speak, but it is certainly effective for stalling your opponent out. If your opponent tries to do something, we'll see exactly how useful Sphere Mode can be a little bit later. Finishing up our entire main deck monster stable is a pair of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, which should, if my little diatribe earlier didn't explain it properly, tell you how important ruining your day is to this deck. Most of the extra deck, as you'll see, is full with targets for cherries, or targets for another card we'll get to in a bit, and nothing quite says you're done to a salad player like
Hitting
playing
all their
Gazelle, dropping cherries, and banishing all of their Sunlight Wolves.
It's a good feeling.
It's a great feeling. Anyway, on to our spells. Once more, obvious choice. Black Illusion Ritual. I run 3. I've received advice up to this point, advice that I'm not willing to throw away to move down to 2. I've had less than perfect luck getting what I need, or have occasionally even lost the amount I need, and the deck has been shut down because, well, I can't summon Relinquish, and Relinquish is kind of important to a Relinquish deck. But to help speed that along, I run 2 pre-preparation of rights and 1 preparation of rights, all for the noble goal of getting what I need to set up my board as fast as possible, which is the name of the game in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, obviously. But at the end of the day, Relinquish is still fairly slow. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. You run your hot reds, you have all these negation monster effects. It's a chore to be able to actually use any effect where you are targeting a monster to equip it, and so I run 3 Dark Ruler No Mores, because 2 is simply not enough to ruin your opponent's entire chance of getting back at you. If you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! In the past month, you know exactly what Dark Ruler No More is, and if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! In the past month, it's probably ruined your day at least once. The only real out to Dark Ruler that I've seen fairly consistently is Orcus Crescendo, and going back to the Kaiju a minute, usually they only have a single Galatea to go with their Dingirsu or whatever they have, and all that requires is 1 Kaiju over Galatea, and Crescendo is now a dead card.
Can I say something really interesting about this card?
Is it about how you can search your trains with it?
No, this card.
Yeah.
So, what's great about Dark Ruler No More other than the fact that it negates all your opponent's monster effects, it does have another form of out that if you activate a spell or trap card in response and then have a targeting effect like Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, you can then negate this. It only specifically says that you can't respond with a monster effect, but if you then respond with a spell or trap like Flash Spell, you can then negate this with your Hot Red. So
true, but it is still that requires a certain level of
it's a game state,
constant attention, which doesn't show up so much these days in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I guess that's a good thing. I don't know. Anyway, I run a pair of instant fusions for obvious reasons. This is a deck composed of level 1s and level 1 fusions, so the ability to get them like that is fairly desirable. Better yet, going back to our little tricks from earlier, because instant fusion destroys the fusion it summons at the end of the turn, it triggers the effect of Illusionist Faceless Magician, immediately starting that loop, which is never a bad thing. On to the next polymerization, the best polymerization, the super polymerization. Super poly is one of your other main strategies for several reasons. One being that your actual main extra deck monster is costing almost completely generic cost as long as you have Relinquished, so at any point you just drop a hot super poly and eat whatever their most beloved thing on board is.
What are the fusion materials? It's Relinquished and
any effect monster.
Any effect monster.
One effect monster.
So this is a really, really good card in this deck.
This is maybe the most important card in your deck.
Amazing. So you can have some turn 1 plays as long as you have this.
You can certainly have some turn 1 plays. This is, in my opinion, still very much a go second deck, seeing what your opponent has. The point of Relinquish has always been and always will be counterplay. It requires you to understand what your opponent is doing well enough to be able to beat them at their own game.
Yeah.
That's a good. Super Poly is a good card.
Super Poly is a great card. That's like saying the sky is really blue.
Too bad they're common, so you never see them.
Well, one's a rare, so you'll probably see that one.
Yeah.
Probably. Every 10 games.
Finishing up our collection of fusion spells is simultaneously one of the most useful and by far the least useful, and that is Relinquished Fusion. Relinquished Fusion is a card released during Legendary Duelist Ancient Millennium, along with all of the other excellent Relinquished support. And simply put, you can fusion summon an Eyes Restrict monster from your extra deck by banishing the materials on it from your hand, field, or extra deck. Now, this is generally a pretty big minus. If you use your Millennium Eyes Illusionist to make it, then you are losing that very good repeatable hand trap. If you are using one of your, you have to use one of your Relinquish for it. So once more, you are losing that important piece of your deck. And so it is kind of a rough card to justify. However, the second effect makes all the difference. What you can do during your main phase is banish your Relinquish Fusion, and your Relinquish or Eyes Restrict Fusion monster immediately can target any effect monster your opponent controls and equip it as though it were part of their effect, giving you yet another chance to take your opponent's things. Now, in the case of the well-known Relinquish and Thousand Eyes Restrict cards, that is maximum of 1. And that's a rough sit. But we will be getting to the granddaddy of the archetype, the best boy, in a short while, and he has no limits. Anyway, on to our more generic stuff. I run a pair of Twin Twisters because back row is the worst, and I hate it like I hate a lot of things. I currently run either 2 Pots of Extravagance, 2 Pots of Desires, or 1 of each, depending on who I'm playing. If I'm playing a meta deck, then I'm going to want to use the Desires so that I have access to every Super Poly target that I will be looking for. If I'm not, I have a deceptively large amount of space in my extra deck, so I feel comfortable running Pot of Extravagance.
It's better than Desires into Desires. At least you could Extravagance into Desires and then use them.
The next turn. Remember, Extravagance is the only time you're allowed to draw cards in a turn. The last 2 cards of our deck goes to yet another grabbing play, which is Crackdown. Now, I've been debating for a short while on whether it is worth using Crackdown or whether it is worth using Widow Anchor, as both achieve similar effects, but as others have advised me, and I don't think this is totally wrong, although I'm not totally convinced yet, the lack of ability to search for Widow Anchor weakens it. But I'll let you be the judge of that. Anyway, on to our extra deck. And our extra deck is... The real extra deck is 5 cards, maybe a 6th card. And those cards are very simple. It is 1 Thousand Eyes Restrict.
Only one.
Only one. Because as you'll notice, that deck did not include a single Thousand Eyes idol in it. So how am I summoning it? Purely through instant fusion. That's the only way you do it.
And you only have the 2 instant fusions.
I only have 2 instant fusions. And sometimes I'd rather use that instant fusion on my boy, Millennium Eyes Restrict. Probably the best instant fusion target ever printed. Millennium Eyes Restrict is the love child of Thousand Eyes Restrict and Called by the Grave. Yeah. Once per turn, as a quick effect, anytime your opponent activates an effect of a monster, you can take any effect monster on their field or in their grave. And that alone is useful, but even wilder, if you take a monster with Millennium Eyes Restrict, any monsters equipped with Millennium Eyes Restrict, any card in either player's deck is basically unusable. Their effects are negated, and you cannot activate effects of that monster.
Can you still summon the monster?
You can normal summon them, but if they have, say, an effect to special summon it, like Cyber Dragon, for example, you cannot.
Or the Spinny.
Or the Spinny.
Mm-hmm.
Millennium Eyes Restrict can shut down a tremendous amount of decks. Every deck, period. There are no decks that do not use monster effects. And usually, if you're using a monster effect, it's fairly important. So you have access to once in a turn with Millennium Eyes Restrict, once in a game, technically, with Relinquished Fusion, and once a turn with Millennium Eyes Illusionist.
Now, is this effect, is it permanent, or is it only while it's equipped?
It's only while it's equipped, but it's fairly hard to kill something that gets bigger each time it goes. And if you do manage to pop it, first off, congratulations. You're a better man than most of the people I've played. Illusionist Faceless Magician comes back.
This is once per turn.
This is once per turn, but this makes it twice per turn, and this makes it 3 times a turn.
And then this recurs it.
And that gives it an extra life, because if you pop Millennium Eyes Restrict, Illusionist Faceless Magician comes back. And if you get rid of Illusionist Faceless Magician any way aside from bouncing it or spinning it, guess who's back in your main monster zone?
What's the most amount of monsters you've ever had equipped to this
Oh,
card?
I've taken 5.
You've taken 5 monsters.
I've taken 5 monsters
Wow.
and completely demolished the last living Lair Infernoid player. It was really funny.
Rip it to him.
Oh, yeah.
They're now extinct.
They are now extinct because I killed them with my hands.
They're now relinquished.
They have been sacrificed. Now, the obvious play for if you were running a bunch of level 1 monsters in your deck is everybody's favorite boy, Linkuriboh. Now, Linkuriboh is good or bad depending on the composition of your hand. If you have Illusionist Faceless Magician in your hand or your graveyard, you don't want to go into Linkuriboh. You should be happy to let this pop. Because if you tribute it, or if you move it for a Link summon, this doesn't go off. It has to be destroyed. But it is still a very useful card. I think it doesn't need to be said how much of an impact Linkuriboh has made on the game. Everybody runs one practically. So it's a no-brainer. But I only run one because, well, the only one I'm usually doing it for is Thousand Eyes Restrict. Millennium Eyes Restrict, I don't want it to be gone if I can help it. The last occasional card is the evergreen, at this point, Nightmare Phoenix.
Obligatory.
Obligatory at this point. I don't think anything needs to be said about Phoenix. If you've played
You're
Lynx,
not running this.
if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh, you've played this.
What they do?
What's it do?
Nah.
Let me read it.
Pops a spell or
Let
trap
me
on the
read it.
field.
But let me read it.
But going back to the real stuff,
Side decks.
what are all these? Oh, these are not side decks, my friend. See, I may have 5 cards in my extra deck, but I still run a 15-card extra deck.
15-card extra deck.
Let me explain why.
Wait, what?
These are super poly targets
Okay.
because you will be using super poly whenever possible, and you don't always want to or have to use Millennium Eyes. So you tailor your extra deck to anything that could show up. I had a wonderful game the other day.
Is that Trinity?
It's Trinity, because there was nothing funnier than a very excited hero deck who's about to summon their fusion when you flip Super Poly and make Trinity and empty all of their boards alongside their hopes.
That's actually really funny.
The rest of the extra deck is Cherries targets.
Oh, cherries.
Remember, I run 2 Cherries. I have no need of cards that are not Restricts or Link Kuribo's, so why not fill the rest of the deck with evergreen cards, the things you need. And once this is gone, usually so is your entire game plan. Let's see the Sky Striker players keep going without their Shizukus or their Kagaris. Let's see Dragon Link players really pop off when Ib has been banished before they could even play her. Or their Guard Dragons, for that matter. And really, that's the point of the deck. I have the 5, once more, actual cards that I run in my extra deck, or my side deck rather, here.
The rock.
Very simple. Parrot of Neru's and Ashes for Taste. But, like I said, I run a 15-card side deck as well.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I run a side deck based off of what the most popular extra deck choices are at this point. So, no matter who I'm playing, I have the means to completely ruin their day. Sometimes they're regional. Definitely they're local. And really, that's all there is to it.
Okay. Well,
If I want to really teach you people that the way you've played for so long at this point is a mistake and you need to learn better, then I'm going to have to teach you how to make a sacrifice.
So you activate this card, you get to look at your opponent's deck, and then you
Relinquished,
rip their
Relinquished's
card.
Japanese name is sacrifice. It's a pun. Damn it, Travis. You
and
ruined
at
it again.
that,
Fuck
we
off.
end this video.
So let's hit the ground.